So we're at the end here. 9 times out of 10 on the average, the phone calls that I made weren't returned. Emails weren't answered. People who did reply only after I bugged them over and over and over again. I don't know what it is. I can't say that I'm John Grisham or I can't, you know, Stephen King or anybody like that. They just know I'm a writer. So some of them want to answer you and some of them don't. Once I did make contact, a lot of the people just didn't have anything useful to say. Maybe because they didn't want to say something about somebody they knew, perhaps, for other reasons, lots of reasons why. And some of the people I really wanted to talk to still have not answered me, and at some point I've got to call it done, you know. But I'll try one more time with them before I'm ready to publish the book. In the meantime, I've been able to help Steve compose his writs. Hopefully I've been making them a little better, I don't know. Writs have to be written very specifically. The legal language is, he had one writ rejected in an appeal at this, one of the court in San Angelo because he didn't quote a particular rule on the front page. He quoted it in the body of it, about page 9 or something.
Is he representing himself, or does he have?
He is at this point.
They're much harder on people.
And they're supposed to actually give them more leeway if they're pro se.
They don't.
They don't. But if it's if you make any mistake at all, and you're pro se,
kick it out for
they
that
kick
reason.
it out.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal with it. It's a pain in the ass.
So we've been very, very cautious lately to try to make sure that everything's composed correctly.
The right size of margins, the right number of lines per page.
The size of the font.
Everything.
Any little thing that can get you kicked out of the court and out of their way.
They don't want to deal with it.
Exactly.
The law libraries that they have in prisons are horrible. They're out of date for one thing. The inmate has to know the exact case number of the case that they want to look up to be able to look it up.
Yeah, because they're playing attorney.
Yes.
And that's the way the judge looks at it. You're
Yeah.
playing your own attorney, then you need to know this stuff.
Right. But the law libraries, they could easily, you know, do a search under the name of, you know, Chavez v. Texas or whatever, and find it, but they won't do it unless they have the case number.
Exactly.
And how do they get the case number?
That's when
You get,
You know,
exactly.
yeah.
You got to be in the
So
system.
I spend a lot of my
Playing the
time
game.
Googling cases to give him the numbers that he needs to get the case at the law library. Yeah.
Does your book deal with the reasons, or your reasons for the lie? Possibly, does it deal with some possible?
I've never been able to talk to her. They've cut off. I talked to the mother once after I was up doing a research interviews and things up in the area, and somebody called the mother, and she called me on the way back to Houston, and cursed me out for quite a while. I said, "Look, I'd love to talk to you. Can you let me get home because I'm in heavy traffic?" And just 30 minutes later, she called me back, and I got a half-hour conversation on tape, in which she wouldn't bend on anything, you know. I tried to convince her of a few things, but mostly told her I am writing the book and I'm going to write it anyway. You know, I did tell her I was going to be disguising their name, and she seemed okay about that. I forgot what the question was.
Does your book deal with any possible motivations?
I have some theories. Like I say, I haven't been able to verify them with anybody in the family, and certainly the girl's not talking to me. But I have an idea why, and I'll tell you about it if you want to know. But she and her mother and the girl's brother were close family friends. And they came over occasionally. To what?
To your brother. You said close family friends.
To my brother, yeah, to my brother and his family. And they did come over occasionally for barbecues and, you know, to hang out socially and that kind of thing. And she says that while she was over there, sometimes she and her brother would spend the night, and that things started happening while they were there overnight. She said that in the space of 2.5 years, there were 80 to 90 different times that she was sexually assaulted by my brother.
Wow.
The reason why she said it, you would not know from anything that she said, except that in the interview she did, was the first time I heard about this. She said that she attended sleepovers with her friends, and that the girls who went farther with a guy without actually doing it would kind of get brownie points with the other girls. They were cooler. And she started telling them these stories about her being molested by this older, or having sexual experiences with this older guy. And never saying who he was. I don't know if that actually happened, because I found so many instances where I could say that she did this particular thing, but then I found out that maybe she didn't. I don't know when she's lying and when she's telling the truth. But if I take her at her word about that, she said that she did this over a period of time, telling them over and over again about all the different things that they did. She told one person that she named a guy at another school, like a football player, that, you know, was the guy who was, you know, was dating her. She had another time she said it was Steve's son, Bo, who was about 18 or 19 at the time, because she said that was cool with junior high kids, because then he was 19, that was okay. If she did this, if she did tell her friends.
And we can't even verify that she actually told her friends.
No, I mean, we can't.
There's conflicting stories from her about whether or not she said this.
Yeah, but if she did, there was a time when she was in at an assembly at school, and a man, one of the, I guess we didn't talk about him yet, he was in one of the other examples, he ran an abused women's shelter, came to give a talk about sexual abuse at the school. And at the end of it, he said, if you have been abused, you should tell somebody, you should tell your parents, your preacher, somebody. If you can't tell anybody, come here and tell me. You know, I'll tell you what to do. And her story is that she was looking upset because all this stuff had happened to her, and she realized now, finally, after 2.5 years, that she had been abused, that's the way she put it, that a girl who was sitting there came over and said, "What's wrong?" You know, she said after some coaxing, she told her, and the girl said, "Well, you've got to go up and talk to him. You have to." And she said, "I'll go up there with you. I'll support you. I'll get you up there." And she says, and that's what happened. And she got up there and she told him about her abuse. If she had been telling her friends all of this stuff and it was a lie, the reason she might have been looking upset was because this guy was laying out all the possible ways that someone could be abused, and she had been telling her friends this has been happening to her. And if she didn't go up and talk to the guy, she would be admitting to her friends that she had been lying to them all this time. So she was I think she was kind of between a rock and a hard place. There's some other factors that built into that. There were some other things going on toward that period of time where she was feeling kind of marginalized. But I think she just at some point said she had to do this. The interesting thing is the girl who went over and helped her, I got a hold of her and her mother. And the girl said my mother would remember it better than me. And I called the mother, and the mother called me back and said, well, yeah. She said she came home and she said, oh, well, guess what happened today? We were giving a talk about abuse at the school, and I saw Hannah, and she looked upset, and I went and talked to her, and she told me that she'd been abused by her mother's boyfriend. Her mother's boyfriend is a sex offender, a registered sex offender that her mother started dating, and dated for about 8 to 10 months.
And he lived in the house for a while.
He lived in the house for a while too, for at least 4 months, we think. I don't know if she was ever abused. I don't know if maybe she was abused by somebody else. If she went up to talk to the guy, maybe she's now, I can't tell it. It was this guy, you know, because mom's dating him. You know, what am I going to do? So she came up with a name. And
how old is she now?
She's 25, roughly, something like that.
Yeah, she would be.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Was there any, it would be a juvenile case, and, you know, it really wouldn't be able to be reported and out there in the open, but was there any kind of stories about this locally? About what happened to your brother? I mean, have you talked to the journalist who wrote it?
I have talked to talked to the editor of the newspaper there several times for several reasons. There were also some things that I found out from some other interviews that people did in which he was mentioned, the editor was, and I've talked to him about that, and he says he doesn't remember doing that, but other people remember him.
It's a small town newspaper, so he's really not going to tell you all that
And,
much.
you know,
But
yeah, but he wrote several articles about the trial and what was happening with the trial. And in between trial number 1 and trial number 2, they published 24 articles in the space of 3 weeks about sexual abuse, predators. Every day there was something on front page, top of the fold.
Wow.
yeah, I mean that's news.
You know,
That's selling.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It was sensationalist.
but anyway, that's kind of where we are with that. A lot of the inmates don't try to go to trial. They accept a plea deal, especially if they're indigent or they're poor. It's very costly. It basically wiped out Steve's whole family. His son owed a ton of money after that. He hocked his truck and some other stuff and paid off all the debts, and he's fine now. He's back and working steadily. But they take the plea deal rather than going to trial because, you know,
It's easier.
it's
yes.
you get 2 years
Better for
instead
the
of
family.
20,
Sure.
and it's done with. But Steve wouldn't do it. He said he's not guilty. He wasn't going to say he was. But this latest writ, the 1107, it's a writ of habeas corpus. He's preparing it right now. I went and interviewed the counselor, the lawyer that represented him in that trial. That lawyer is now a district judge on the same level as the judge who presided over his trial. And when I presented him with some information, which is in one of the other examples, about a juror who
No.
a prospective juror.
Yeah.
During voir dire, they asked questions about, do you know these people? Have you ever worked for an agency that deals with abused people? There were lots of questions like that. She answered other questions that were kind of innocuous and didn't answer any of those questions. Didn't raise her hand and say, oh yeah, I'm a member of CASA,
She slipped her
which is the child advocate. She was she was a volunteer for CASA for 4 years, between 2001 and 2005. And if she had been on that jury, he said if he had known, he would have struck her. But she, by lying by omission, that's what this writ's about, basically. The judge also swore her in, the judge that presided, and should have known who she was.
He swore her into CASA.
He swore her into CASA, and she appeared in this court at least twice, and the judge said nothing. And anyway,
Wow.
Did she
Yeah.
actually? She was actually on the jury.
she was
Yeah.
on the jury, yeah. And that was the trial in which they made a deal. There were 3 counts against him. The more serious one was aggravated sexual assault of a child. It was the first one because she was 12 at the time. The other 2 were sexual assault of a child, which carried lesser penalties. And they couldn't break the deadlock.
Yeah.
And at some point, one of the jurors said, and we don't know who, but one of the jurors said, look, if you will all vote guilty, we will vote to acquit on the other 2 charges. And so they traded votes, which is illegal, of course. And a juror came forward and said, this is what we did, and we got her testimony at his motion for a new trial. But because of 2 Texas rules, which also is federal rules, and you probably got them in Carolina too, they parallel the federal rules, most courts do. Anything that happens in the jury room cannot be used to change a verdict.
Really?
Except in very, very few circumstances, very rare circumstances.
And only if somebody in the jury comes forward during the trial.
Yeah, if they come forward before, they can say, oh yeah, they're trying to get us to vote, and the
But
judge
once
can
the
say, oh,
verdict has
that's it,
been
mistrial.
issued,
Then
it's
that's it.
illegal to trade votes, but they have to come forward during the trial to say someone is trading
And they
votes.
probably don't know that.
After, right.
And that's part of their
After the
protection.
after the
though.
verdict has
Wow.
been rendered, nothing said in the jury room.
So if Connie Wilcox, the juror who worked for CASA and all of that, if she was the one who came up with the deal, you know, or participate, well, everybody, they all participated in it, all 12
right.
jurors, yeah, actually violated the law. But she could very likely have been the one who was pushing people to convict him on something. You know, who knows? So.
Well, it's part of the whole system, and that's how they're able to discuss it in private and come up with their decision. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you
They-
can
I mean, I
see the
understand that.
reason.
They don't want to open up the jury room after a verdict because
Right.
it would cause
And
them
you have to have the guts.
retry
Yeah,
every
you'd
trial.
never be able to do
Yeah,
that.
it goes to. So, if I learned any one thing out of all of this,
You can't always.
to paraphrase Mick Jagger, you might not get what you want, but if you try real hard, you just might get what you need. So, thank you. Any other questions?
Did they do some physical testing on this girl? Obviously, surely.
She did have a doctor's exam about 2 weeks or so after she made the accusation. Her mother, after she told her mother that mother took him down to the sheriff's office the next day, and she gave an affidavit there. And a couple of weeks later, she did see a doctor. They did a regular pelvic exam. They determined that she had a, what's the exact word?
Partially torn hymen.
Partially torn hymen, yeah, that it was still essentially virginal, was actually the quote the doctor used. And that was introduced in the trial, and
You can't find out anything.
Of course, if
but-
someone
Who
has
abused her right back.
strong
No.
physical activity.
Yeah, there's a million ways that could
well,
happen.
she claimed that the last incident of abuse happened on February 14th at Steve's son's 21st birthday party. And she made the accusation on April the 8th. So there was quite a period of time between the last time she was even at their house and the time that the accusation was made. So I can't imagine that anything that the doctor had said, other than she was still a virgin basically, legally, you know, medically. One of his first appeals was, the very first appeal in Texas after anything is to the next regional court, and
Yeah.
Eastland, Texas is where this one was. And he had had a marijuana conviction 22 years before.
Right. But that
And,
would count
and
against.
they brought it up in the trial. The lawyer argued against it, but they brought it up. And they basically just used it to get him to say
Right.
that he had said that he would never do anything to harm his wife, his child, you know, anybody. And they said, well, what about this marijuana conviction? Doesn't that prove that you're a lousy guy? And,
Oh,
Man.
And he was
And-
like, what, 20 at the
he was
time?
18,
No.
19, yeah.
well, there's your proof right
You know,
there.
But the Eastland court said if that mention of this previous conviction had swayed the jury in any way, they would have convicted him on all 3 counts, not on just one. But the
And they
reason that they
convicted him on
convicted him on
one.
the other one is because they made a deal. And they knew that. I mean, that was they saw the testimony from the juror, but they can't use that.
Can't acknowledge it.
None of the courts can use that.
Wow.
It's
yeah.
incredible.
So when do you think you will publish?
I need to publish as soon as possible because the longer I wait, the longer he has to stay in. But he's going to drop this 1107 soon, within a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
And we're hoping that will at least get him an evidentiary hearing, if not a new trial.
Yeah, they have.
And so I'm continuing to write the book, but at some point, I've got to finish it, get it out there. I'm going to send it to every lawyer and newspaper outlet in the state and say, this is the way they do things in Asheville County, which is not the real name.
We'll know what you need.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have to get any sort of documentation in terms of, like, permission? And maybe that's the thing, is because you're not using people's real names, you don't have to actually get permission?
Technically, everybody I've talked to, every lawyer I've talked to said that it's very, very rare that I would get sued, that's probably not going to happen. It was an open trial, open to the public, so all the testimony
It's
is
public
absolutely public record, and I can use everything from that. But I have to I have to speculate about some things. I have to say that I think because she said this here and she said this there, that, you know, one of these is clearly a lie, we don't know which, you know, I have to call her a liar a lot.
What
I mean,
about,
in some form.
What is your angle? How does your book start out? What is your lead?
The opening scene I'm using is the day that Steve was home. He worked as a park ranger at the lake nearby, Lake Asheville, and he was mowing his lawn, and he saw the girl's mother drive up in her pickup truck, and he got off the mower, came around front, and she told his daughter that, you know, go in the house, we need to talk. And he came up and he grabbed a beer off the front porch. He had some in a cooler, and he headed toward her car, and he reached up to try to open her back gate, on the tailgate, and sit down, you know. And she said, "Don't touch my fucking truck." And he knew something was up. And he said, "What's the deal? What's the matter?" You know. And she said, "Did you think she would never tell me?" Because her daughter had just told her this, you know, an hour before or less. And he said, "What are you talking about?" You know. And she said, "You need help. You know, you son of a bitch." Got in the truck and tried to back over him. He jumped out of the way in time, and she took off. He said, "Huh?" He went in, he tried to call her on the phone 2 or 3 times. She didn't pick up. He finally called her at her work the next morning, where she had to pick up the phone. And he said, "What's going on?" And she said, "You know what's going on." And he said that's the last word she ever said to him. And it was a couple of weeks before he actually found out, even though she went in that day and made the accusation. But the sheriff's deputy that did the interview with the girl and created the affidavit waited a few days before he called Steve. And then he called him and said, "Can you come in? We need to talk." So he said, "What's this about?" He said, "Come on in." You know. So that I'm starting with that as an opening scene. He's totally confused. He doesn't know what's going on. And then I jump from there to the trial and have a little bit of the prosecutor's closing argument, a little bit of the defense attorney's closing argument, and then the jury deliberating and coming out with their verdict. And then I go back and start telling the story of what we know, what I can prove or what I can say about their relationship with the family, the race, you know, other things.
What was the thing that Hannah said about easy to trick people, something like that?
This was gonna be the title of the book at one point. She said in the interview that she did that she was talking about her father being a serial liar, and that she learned a lot from him, she said. And she said, and besides, it's not that hard to fool people around here. That was going to be the title. It's not that hard to fool people around
I think
here.
you're attacking the victim,
Right.
which is good for a book. But I think the goal is to get your brother out.
The goal is to prove that everything that was said in the trial, as much as I can, is a lie. Yeah. And I'm hoping to not make it too academic. You know, I'm hoping to use my skills as a novelist to try to, you know, make it interesting at the same time. Anything else?
Yeah, I want to start researching.
because the reason is, what really surprised, so, disclaimer, Bill's writing a book.
Yeah.
But one of the things that surprised me is Bill's doing interviews, and what he was told is he has to get a signed release for any time he does an interview if it's going to be in the book. So that's why I'm curious, like if you go to a publisher.
I'm going to go to a publisher.
Okay.
I'm going to do it myself
That's
and
the
get it out there.
difference. Yeah,
Okay.
the publishers are going to be very
Publishers.
strict.
Because
That totally makes sense. That
I've
totally makes sense.
done
Okay.
literally, I don't know, many hundreds of interviews, and I've never had a release form ever
But
until
book, maybe
the
it's
book.
different.
Yeah, but who's
Yeah,
your
right.
publisher?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah, okay, I was just curious.
But what else can I do?
No,
Yeah.
that's, and we've done the research.
Wow.
totally.
That's
That's
amazing.
interesting.
Anybody, anything else?
Thank you for sharing. That was
That's fascinating.
And good luck with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shoot, I want to come follow this one.
I'll keep you guys updated.
Yeah.
Yeah.